Good day. Welcome to the Strong Ambition podcast. And today we're going to dive into another really fun conversation with my boss, my former boss, my mentor, and my friend, AJ Zeglen. He's been the most repeated guest on the podcast because I have so much fun talking to him about all of this stuff. And he's been so monumental in shaping me in my career. And so it's really fun to be able to dive into all these different topics because every time I'm learning about them, I'm wondering what would AJ think. And this is a really fun conversation because it's in person. This isn't one with whiskey, unfortunately, but we did get to have a sit down in person, which makes it much more intimate. I will mention that there was a little bit of an audio issue as some of these in-persons can tend to be technically more difficult for me to set up. One of my cameras that had the audio actually failed on me after about an hour and 15. The conversation went quite a while, as it normally does with me and AJ. The last 15 minutes, just don't be surprised if the audio is a little bit different, but you should still be able to hear us clearly in what we're talking about. And the camera is just all on AJ at that point. So I do apologize. I'm getting better at this, but it is still a really fun conversation for you to learn a lot about because we dive into a lot of good hot topics. We talk about, are microplastics a real concern? What is the legitimacy of Ozempic and the concerns or the benefit of it? Is cold therapy a good or bad idea when it comes to training and exercise, celebrities and steroid use? And we even dive into a topic that AJ is a little less familiar with, but I wanted to hear his feedback on how he would work for a boxer on conditioning. How would he improve it, especially for an amateur Olympic style boxer that has only 3 rounds? And we dive into a lot of the different ideas I have and he has, and it's a really fun conversation. And we top it off with diving into what AJ's up to now within his own brand called Invictus. Now, with that being said, there's also some really fun things going on with RQ Training Nutrition that I think you should know about. The first thing that you got to know about is just like everyone right around that Black Friday time, I still like to offer a deal when people are looking for good deals to invest in, especially if you're trying to invest in your health. So if you do look at my Instagram, notice my newsletter, at the end of November, that's the Black Friday week, I will be offering an additional month off of any membership that you sign up for. Now, this is only going to happen at that week. Now, here's the other thing is I also have a good intentions promo, which means, yeah, I want to invest, I want to do this thing, but right before Christmas, I don't really want to get into the training and nutrition off the bat because I got a lot of holiday stuff going on. That's fine, because the good intention of signing up then but initiating it in the new year is entirely fine. So sign up during the Black Friday, and then we can kick things off in the new year when you're ready to get fully invested in it. And there's nothing wrong with that. So with that being said, let's say you're not ready to fully invest. Maybe you just don't have the money right now. The other really cool thing coming down here is going to be my free do-it-yourself group. So I'm putting together a free do-it-yourself group. I'm pretty sure it's going to be running off of Facebook. I'm going to have a ton of trainings that shows you how to figure out the right calories, how to figure out the right nutrition plan, protein, calories, everything, how to write your own exercise routine, what kind of days of the week do you want to work off, how do you choose your exercise selection. It's all going to be there, and I'm going to also be supporting you by doing some free Q&As once or twice a month. So this is all going to be free. So keep an eye on my Instagram, on my Facebook, on my newsletter if you haven't signed up already. And there's going to be more information on that provided over the next couple of weeks. And it should be coming out before the end of the month. But enough sales, enough of that stuff. Let's dive into a really fun conversation between a couple lifting bros. Here is AJ Zeglen.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time for this.
Yeah, man.
We're going to dive more into, I want to know more about how things are going with Invictus, the new business. But I'm going to pick your brain a little bit because I love shooting the shit with you about bullshit in training and nutrition.
Yeah.
And just kind of, you scroll on Instagram.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bullshit out there these days. So I like to bring in other professionals and experts that can clear up the noise. So one that comes to mind that I really like to kind of clear up some ideas around, because there's a lot of fear mongering. That's the main theme that a lot of people have, right?
Yeah, because it seems to be on a very not basic, but non-sustainable level probably, but it's like a great motivator for people off the start, right? Is fear.
And I always say it's directive. When you call something evil or toxic or poison, it's like, I'm not allowed to have sugar. You've eliminated a bunch of calories.
Right. Yeah.
And then you say you can't have seed oils. You've eliminated a bunch of calories.
Right. Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, so what are we left with? Well, a lot of whole food. I'm not going to argue that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that those things by themselves, if you just had a little bit, are actually toxic and poisonous.
Correct.
But some people are so empowered by that amount of negativity bias that you mentioned, like that, labeling these things as toxic and evil and all that stuff. And it gives them structure, right? It's like why keto can work for people, why intermittent fasting does work for people, but not a high percentage.
Right, yeah.
And so the thing that people always don't value enough, and they're like, oh, who do I listen to, why not? Usually the people who aren't trying to say crazy things are trying to guide you towards a more flexible approach. If there's anything that is probably better in the research from some of the things I've seen, is flexible dieting. Having some flexibility in your diet is actually what has the long-term probability for it.
Which probably isn't as exciting. Like the more controversial stuff seems to do better online.
For sure.
Gets a higher level of engagement, right? Like I feel like if people come across your stuff and they just seem like, well, here seems like a super reasonable guy with like a really, you know what I mean? Then they might do that and they might just kind of follow you or save your thing and be like, yeah, this makes sense. But, you know, it's probably not such like polarizing conversations happening in the comments section that like feeds the algorithm for more people to see it or yada, yada, whatever. So I think like, and I could be wrong, but I think that some people obviously are like, they might believe it, but they don't actually believe it to the degree that they're expressing it. They're like almost expressing it to like the nth degree. So to make it more polarizing, to make it more controversial, because they feel like it's going to give like a further social media reach and it's going to get more like interaction and stuff like that with people, whether it's positive or negative. And so I think they're just trying to like feed that whole thing. And, you know, in my mind, then I'm like, where's your integrity? But I mean, obviously some people don't care. They rather be popular or make more money or whatever than have integrity, right?
Yeah. And some people are kind of like, they believe their own truth so much, you know, and to your point of like the intensity, like Greg Doucette, I've even seen him in interviews and he's calm. Greg Doucette is that really kind of, this is a calorie deficit. Like he's a really whiny voice, he's really intense, but when you interview him, he's actually calmer, right? And then with,
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like
so there's a bit of an act there
for sure for the views. And then there's another guy I watched recently who is just ranting and he's saying how, you know, Gatorade, you need the carbs, and all this stuff. And I'm like, hey, you're half right. He's like, it's not about the electrolytes. I'm like, oh man, you're so close. This is like, you talk so confidently about something. And the people that you want to pay attention to give you nuance and say, well, it depends. And you know my sentiment is when people say absolutely and always, you absolutely always don't listen to them. Because there's no absolutes in this game. There's problems with everything. And even my own biases. If someone's like, I've always said my bias is high protein. Someone says, but I can get a calorie deficit and I can lose weight without high protein. You're right. Like, you're right. You can live a completely fine life without it. And so one of the ones that, though, I think is actually, I think it's concerning, and I think I don't know if there's enough research around like the plastics is a big topic to me that's coming out now.
All the microplastics found.
Microplastics, and so it could be fear mongering, drinking out of water bottles. I have like routinely, I drink, this is at least a tin one. I have a bunch of other plastic ones.
Yeah, me too.
And I think it's something that should be drawn attention to, but then I also wonder how much, because this is where we become crippled with every decision. You get people cutting off of, you have to cut off these boards, like this thing is killing you, this is killing you. And it's like, I think we know for sure too many calories kills people. I think we know for sure poor fitness kills people. I think we know for sure that psychological issues kill people. Now, I don't want to be so ignorant to that problem that like down the road, and this is what the phthalates could be doing, that like it could be adding up in your system, having endocrine disruptors. And this would actually be something that my kids would deal with more so than even me. So I was curious your opinion on the microplastics topic. I generally just not sure. if I need to worry more about it, have a more of a broad approach, or what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's a good question, to be honest. Obviously, like, I don't have a great answer for it. If you're asking me personally, like, if I'm worried about it, I am not.
Yeah.
Does that mean that I think that it's not true? No. Like, I'm sure there could be some truth to it, or there probably is some truth to it. I'm sure,
Yeah.
But it's just, I guess we kind of pick and choose our spots, right? Mm-hmm. Where we want to, and I'm just like, I'm sure people are going to find something in, like, to kind of pick apart in any way, essentially. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, I don't know. It's just not something that I've kind of kept on my radar. I see it come up a lot, so I'm familiar with it. I fully understand what they're saying about it. I get the principle behind it on why this is bad, that these microplastics are found, like, in the stuff that you drink and the food that you consume and stuff like that. And I totally get it. It just really hasn't been a concern of mine, right?
Well, because it becomes crippling, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many,
it's
like, you have
paralyzing,
man.
Yeah, and I just feel like, geez, what would I don't know, and I'm just like, it's like that big rock, small rock thing, right?
I was just going to use the rock thing. How many rocks can you pick up at once?
Right. And I'm just like, if I got my big rocks, I'm working out every day. I always try to really prioritize. I would be similar to you, where protein's my main priority. Mm-hmm. I would say no matter what my goal is, whether I'm trying to lean out or gain weight or perform in anything that I'm doing, like, my number one concern is always my protein. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if I'm, like, lifting and I got myself a good program and I'm hitting my protein goal and I'm doing my best to, like, get good sleep, and I'm doing, and I feel like I'm, like, fulfilling or even, like, really exceeding at, like, being, like, a good dad and a good husband and like, those things in my life, the important relationships in my life, then I'm just like, I don't know, maybe I'm consuming too many microplastics, maybe I'm not. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I just don't really have, like, time to entertain it, But if all of a sudden, they were like, oh, we banned plastic water bottles because this is a thing, it's not like I'd be upset about it, or it's not like I would fight the system and be like, this is the man keeping me down, I want to drink out of plastic bottles. I'd just be like, oh yeah, I guess they've accumulated enough evidence to make that switch. Okay, that's cool, well, whatever, then I'll be drinking out of a cardboard box or a tin water can, I don't know, whatever, right? And some I have are metal and glass and stuff. I really have no preference. I honestly don't think about it. And some I have are plastic, right? But,
well, it goes to the idea of how many things can you hold on to, and you have a lot of concerns, and then that gets up, like, I think actually having water in the immediate is for sure more important some days than not having water out of a bottle. Some people be like, that's poison, I'm definitely not having it. I'm like, no, actually the water is going to do more for you, even if you're worried about the phthalates today, if you're dehydrated.
Right.
And so this goes into that whole crippling effect. And I think there's a bit of a problem that I even have myself. Like, I want to trust the information more from the data perspective, but it can be delayed.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but at the same time, it could also just not be worth it, and people can make mountains out of molehills.
Yeah.
The prime example would be, like, I think seed oils is probably the top one I can think of. Sugar's another one, where, like, we're not going to argue that if you have a ton of sugar in your diet, you have a ton of seed oils, and here's the big thing there, asterisks, in a calorie surplus when you're metabolically unhealthy.
Yeah.
Those are a problem.
I was going to say, I think it's more so that when you're high in those things, you have a super high calorie intake.
Yeah. And you could have a calorie deficit in all those things. And I mean, provided you have enough micronutrients. The thing that I find interesting is because, like, we want to point at mechanisms that probably could lead to things, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people, I want to call it the fear-mongering community, try to do very well, right? They'll talk about things like the sugar in the seed oils is a prime example where it makes sense somewhat on paper why the seed oils might be more, producing inflammation, possibly even leading to cancer, all these things, all these risks. but why don't we see it in the data? Because that's something that should have developed in the data if it was a problem.
Right.
And whereas the thing that, you see now, they have randomized controlled trials, many of them.
Yeah.
And the people who are talking about, hey, you can't have seed oils, but have butter, have steak.
Yeah.
Now, I'm all for having some butter and steak in the right quantity. But from what we can tell right now from the research, there is not good evidence to suggest that is the healthier move.
Healthier way, right.
It's the opposite, even though as much as you want to hate these seed oils, as much as it seems on paper.
Yeah.
And so microplastics could be something that maybe we do want to pay attention to, but maybe it's not.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like your own viewpoint, where it's like, I got so many other things I don't want to worry about right now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So one of the other views I'd like to hear, because this tends to come a lot from, I want to say the naturopaths, the holistic approach people,
right.
They have more of these viewpoints because they don't wait for data, they wait for anecdote.
Right.
And they go off of their mechanisms and they wait for anecdote, and then that's enough proof for them. Which, don't get me wrong, anecdote is super useful for the people that it helps, but it doesn't track because it's literally not data,
right.
The people that it hurts.
Right.
So you tell someone that they can't have a certain food because of the anecdote they had in the past,
right.
And that person doesn't eat that food, it makes their life harder, they have a hard time sustaining their weight loss, whatever they're doing.
Right.
And it's like, actually, they could have had dairy. Actually, they could have had this. You just thought they shouldn't have.
Right.
Right? Because of this thing that you saw. And you made their diet and you made their life harder with not real proof, but a theory. Right?
Yeah.
Now, on the other side of that, naturopaths will discover things way before the evidence does. That I think the spectrum of nutrition intervention that I'm excited for, but is so new, is food sensitivity.
Right.
Where you can have people who have autoimmune reactions on a spectrum of foods.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? So how do you feel about, naturopaths, holistic approach to eating? Like, what's your overall opinion on some of that stuff?
Yeah. So it's kind of like my opinion on almost anything in the, health and fitness industry, whereas even some of those might be considered more fringe. But I feel like it's just kind of really depends on the person. Let's be honest. So I've worked for a long time in the exercise industry, probably since I think I got my first job at 2001, somewhere in there. So it's been over 20 years. Do I think that there's some naturopaths out there and some people kind of on some of those fringe ones that are kind of like kooks a little bit? Yeah, I do. You know what I mean? That's whatever. Have I met some that are seem like they're awesome? Yeah. I can say the same for chiropractors, physiotherapists, athletic therapists, strength and conditioning coaches, osteopaths, nutritionists, registered dietitians, anyone in there. I've worked with some people that are amazing in their field, at that job, and they hold that title or that designation. And then I've worked with people that hold the same title or designation that I thought were not good at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
People can suck at their job.
Yeah. And so I try not to just paint a whole group of people with a brush and just be like,
good approach.
Oh, all osteopaths suck, or all AT suck, or all chiros suck, or all whatever, because I think it really just has to do with that person and the individual and their understanding of the role that they play in that puzzle, right? And that, for working in strength and conditioning, we play a little piece in that puzzle, right? But there's other things going on in that person's life. And so kind of that, if that individual has a good place or a good understanding, I think, of where they fit in, how they can help, and how they're part of a bigger picture for someone, right? Then I think it's just totally up to the individual. So I can't say that I, in general, have an opinion on a group of people within
it's
there.
Saying
you know what I mean?
Our naturopaths are absolutely not bad. It just depends on the person.
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual.
Well, and the reason I even like that you say chiros, because chiros is a prime example, because they're kind of I want to call them they're not completely in the normal like system, nonconformist in terms of, you know, chiro has their own systems, a lot of things. They're a doctor, but they have their own version of a doctor.
Right.
And you can have, like, some people believe that chiros are a scam.
Yeah.
And I don't think that. It's very similar. I've had some amazing chiros, and I've had some terrible chiros.
Yeah.
And with that, it's like I mean, you know, Craig Sonwhite, he was a chiro.
Dude, I would trust that guy with my life. On anything.
Brilliant guy.
Yeah, totally. So
yeah,
exactly right.
And so people, like, how good someone is at their job really depends on it. And what you mentioned is super important, is the willingness to know where they fit in the puzzle.
Right.
You know, sometimes I just become skeptical when someone's saying about, like, going to see someone for a certain problem. And it's like, okay, you know, you have this chronic issue with your hip or your shoulder, and like, yeah, I mean, my massage therapist is going to help me with it. I'm like, they could help you with a bit of it, a piece of the puzzle, but what else are you doing? Well, my massage therapist, I said, I just need this. I'm like, okay, I can't, like, that can't be the whole solution.
Right.
Even if your strength coach said it was only the strength coach's job, it's not. If it's an injury, they probably should go to the physical therapist, because you're past the point of just it recovering itself.
Right.
You need someone who specializes in recovery.
Yeah.
And I think with, like, naturopaths, I'm actually super optimistic with them when there's autoimmune issues.
Right.
Because I don't think we have the data for that.
Right.
You know, and like, I mean, that's where you get the Jordan Petersons and the Michaela Petersons, which carnivore, no one would have prescribed that for them.
No.
Unless someone was against the grain and willing to, and it's changed their life.
Yeah.
And these are anecdotes, and it doesn't make it proof across the board, but it's so important, because there is this big cohort that most people should pay attention to that is the simplest form of flexible dieting that you can have.
Right.
But then there's people on the fringe that have these autoimmune issues that are messing up their hormones, that are messing up these other things. But it doesn't mean it's you, but it is valuable when people start to notice these things to go to someone like a naturopath that might be able to help. But I just think, like, they end up muddying the waters a lot more in terms of the information for the average person.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of people want to be the special case. They want to be the unique things. Like, why can't I do it? Why can't I do it? And it's like, because it's just hard to have behavior change.
Yeah.
You know, I think people underestimate how hard it is to do the same thing again and again and again, especially with dietary interventions.
Yeah.
Without going backwards.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And in that same breath, like, a lot of professionals want to be the reason why someone's successful.
Yeah.
And in reality, I'm like, I'm not the reason why anyone has been successful.
Yeah.
They're the reason why they've been successful with whatever we've tried, right? I've been a tool that they've been able to use along the way, but I don't try to, I don't think that I'm the most important part of that equation. Right. Where a lot of people want to feel that they're the most important part of that equation, and they want to be the person that has all the answers, or the person that whatever. And I get it, maybe helps drive business towards them if people have that perception that, like, oh, this naturopath or this person, like, they do something different. No one's ever done this. No one's ever heard this. Like, they're so special. If they're helping all these people become successful, and they're
the secret.
Yeah, they're the secret. They got the secret sauce or whatever, right? And you know, none of us do. None of us have the secret sauce. And and at the end of the day, if anyone is successful in strength and conditioning, or with nutrition in their diet, or with their mental health, or with their whatever other thing that they're working through, it's because they have realized that they're the person that has the power to change their life, their own life, and do all this stuff. And they've made that decision, and they followed through on it. Now, you can help them come to that realization, but as you know, like, we can't do anything for people, right? Like,
no, and what you're mentioning, and you've spoken about this before, and I think it's super valuable, and I even need to hear it, because it was funny when you had said, you know, people want to be the solution, people want to be the, I do too. Like, I totally have that, and it's, you're unknowingly being selfish in this evolution, but I have been able to more often, when people are not getting success with me, and they decide, like, okay, we got to cancel, I'm like, you're right.
because I'm not your, I don't have the path for you.
Right.
These are the paths that's worked for people in the past.
That's
I can follow this form of a path, this form of structure, this form of lifestyle. I've tried to meet you where I think you're at. And if you feel like all of these are not you, you're 100% right. Find someone else and take myself out of the equation. But I think it might even help me as a coach, the way that you had said it is like, I'm not the reason, you're the reason. Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things for people to find is it within themselves.
Right.
You have to be the one to save yourself. You have to be, now you might find inspiration, you might find guidance, you might find interesting, tips and tricks along the way. Right. But as far as the action has to be you. Yes. And that's like, that's just the hardest part. It's like people are waiting for, I always say this, even to myself and to other people, is like, no one's coming to save you. Right. Like no one comes to save you from your own mess. Mm-hmm. You have to be the person that saves you from your own island. Like it is you with inside you. Yeah, 100%. And a lot of the people who do make these changes finally, I think, just have some sort of a light bulb moment that they do. They find the willingness to save themselves, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And yet, like we get it, don't get me wrong. Like I love helping people. Mm-hmm. It gives me a sense of purpose and usefulness in this world that I've never found anywhere else. Sometimes I'll talk to Keith,
Those, yeah.
And Keith will always say, even I'm a frequent guest. I'm a bi-weekly guest on his show, in the lab, and where he brings myself on as a psychotherapist, and we do a little 15-minute spot. And he always introduced me. He's like, "This is the guy that changed my life." When I met AJ, and I'm always like, "Dude, I never actually changed your life at all. Like you changed your life." Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. It feels nice that you're wanting to give me credit for it, but I didn't make any of the decisions that changed your life. Right. I made zero of them. Right. Actually, none. Yeah.
Physically, you had to go do everything.
You sought out the gym. Whereas you came in and walked in and had a conversation. I answered all your questions. You showed up the next morning at 6 a.m. and got going. And, so we developed a program and we worked, and then we became close friends from there, and we worked on a whole bunch of stuff together. I made zero of those choices. Mm-hmm. Those choices were all made by him.
Right. And that's super important.
Once he made the choice, I supported it,
guiding it.
And guided and supported it. And I love that guy like a brother. Like you know what I mean? And I'm so happy with the relationship we have, and I'm so happy that he feels that I was able to bring value to his life and the things that he was trying to accomplish, but I didn't do any of them. Right. He did all of them. He made all those choices.
Yeah. And it's so important people hold empowerment to that, because if you're not aware that you're the one doing it, you're doing these things, and when things go wrong, you got to remind yourself, like, I'm the one that actually did that. Right. And in some way to maintain that empowerment of your decisions. Right. But I think it's just great that you have this belief in the way that you're coming back to pushing it to the person in a good way. Yeah. And it also reminds you what you should be doing for someone, because when you're trying to coach someone through these problems, it's like, this better than you're the one who's been given this time. It's like they have to be the solution to their own problem, and asking the right questions, guiding them in the right way. Yeah. And they have to find the solution. It can't be my solution because it's not my life. Right. And having the idea, like, I'm going to be a tool, I'm going to be helpful, I'm going to be guiding. Yeah. But really, ensuring that you're pushing that person to be empowered from it. Yeah. And I feel like that's why I'm so fascinated with what you're into now with the psychology, because it is the biggest problem even within nutrition to me, because we're getting more and more of a clear idea of the information. I think I always talk about the specific situations. There's going to be food sensitivity, there's going to be food preferences, there's definitely smaller differences than just the calorie deficit in protein and fiber. Right. But at the same time, like, those three big rocks can help a lot of people. With the right protein, right calorie, just within a normal meal distribution, normal calorie deficit can serve so many people. But if we know it's from here to here, why don't we do it? And that why is so within, right? And even with exercise. And
it was funny because I went to school for trying to help people with training.
Yeah.
Oh, I realized it was all about nutrition. Try to go with that. Oh no, people got to make the choice. And so it was like, it always comes, and to me, that's actually the centerpiece of it.
Right.
And it's funny because in school, they don't touch each other.
Right.
Like you have kinesiology, you're not actually overlapping with the nutrition. You got to use Canada's Healthy Food Guide. It's all scope of practice.
Right.
You go over to nutrition. And I think you got to go to the psychological course that was like eating disorders. They got rid of it. They got rid of it at U of M. They got rid of it when I went to look for it.
Oh, the psychology. Yeah. It's a great course, man.
Well, you told me about it. And I was like, this sounded amazing. And that's such an important thing to have.
Oh, I can't believe they got rid of that.
Like, it's probably one of the most important things. It should be in the nutrition.
Right.
It should be an option.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Like you're gonna hire dietitians and you're not giving them a psychological foundation to at least understand how to respond from these people.
Yeah.
At least they maintain sport nutrition in that degree. So they do have a sport nutrition one. And then in psych, again, you're not touching either of those things. Right? They have exercise science a little bit, but it's broad behavior modification. It's very broad. It's very simplistic. It's very, reward people, systems like that.
Right, yeah.
But I don't think it does enough of the problem-solving process for people. But yeah, I just think within the realm of, health in general, I think more the problem to me is coming and stemming more from mental health challenges in people, because it's not a question of if people are disciplined in what they are comfortable in.
Right.
So I've said this, especially within like the new realm of Ozempic, which is another topic I was going to chat about.
Yeah.
So many people hate on Ozempic in the fitness industry, especially if they're fit, they're going to hate on it, right? Because I can do it. It's discipline.
Right.
And I've said this for a while. You don't have enough overweight, disciplined people in your life.
Right.
Because I know a lot of them. I know a lot of overweight and obese people that are great at what they fucking do.
Right.
They work really hard.
Right.
But they're super uncomfortable outside of that. They do not, because they're so good at these other things, they focus so much energy on these other things.
Right.
And a long-term calorie deficit's fucking hard.
Yeah.
And clearly they're willing to do work, but this stuff isn't comfortable for them.
Right.
And for us to just say, oh man, it's just discipline. It's like, clearly that advice doesn't fucking help anyone.
Right.
And Ozempic is a proof of if you give them the drug that makes them not think about it, they lose weight.
Right.
So some people don't have the same like food noise almost.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and I'll just come anecdotally from the perspective of it doesn't matter if I'm in a deficit or a surplus.
Right.
Food noise is always there. Like finally, like I've realized this over the last few years, years of dieting, years, that I had to pay attention to that food noise even when I'm doing a slight muscle building phase.
Right. Because
I will still fucking want to go way past that wall.
Right.
I only need to hit here. It doesn't matter if I'm in calorie maintenance, slight surplus, I can always keep eating.
Yeah.
That does not disappear. Right? So that same feeling of like, oh, it's still going to be there. You have to be okay with stopping eating because I'm capable of enjoying that food so much.
Right.
Whereas you talk about someone else, one of my, my other friend Ray that he was a hard gainer, and he was just like, oh, this bloats me. This is hard. I'm like, oh, bloats you? It fills you? What food was that? Because I got to eat more of it.
Right.
Hard for him to put on these calories. Hard for him to eat food. Hard for him. When someone says, I'm so busy, I forget to eat. Oh my God. I forget to be busy because I'm eating. It's so the opposite. But so to come back to the Ozempic thing, I would love to know your view on Ozempic and how you feel about it in culture now. What do you think it's going to do to the industry and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like most things, I think that, they discovered it and that it can work for these things. Like obviously sometimes they're testing out drugs for other reasons and stuff, and then they realize that they work in other ways that they didn't know. And it seemed to be very helpful for this. I think like as a medical intervention, it seems like it's pretty successful, right? Because there's a difference too, sometimes we forget, between the person trying to lose their last 5 pounds so they look good at the beach and the person that is needing medical intervention, where they're at a state of being so overweight that it's now a risk to their life. Right. And I think it starts out in that path, and then most things start out in that way, just like gastric bypass surgery started that way and stuff like that, and then it just kind of filters down, right? Because all of a sudden, if you have all these people that were 500 pounds losing all this weight, and now you've lowered the risk of all these other things, and people are like, oh, this is super effective for weight loss, and it just kind of makes its way down through the population into everything, right? And then I think that, like, it's like a tool to be used. I think nothing is really inherently good or bad on its own. It's how we use it as people. Do I think that there's probably people out there that abuse it or use it when they maybe don't need to, or in situations? Probably.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, bodybuilders are using it now.
Oh yeah, totally.
Have you seen some of the reels of some of the female actresses, and like,
no.
Oh man, it's hilarious. So they'll have all these well-known actresses and how they lost weight, and they'll say Pilates, yoga, juicing. They'll like blame it on something. It's like, really? Like, but like how fast? And it's just like, And honestly, I don't even like, here's the funny thing. I don't think people should use them for that, but I also don't blame or like criticize harshly celebrities, because that is a hard fucking lifestyle. They're in the spotlight, and like
part of their job.
It's a part of it. It's like a bodybuilder.
I'm not a proponent of everyone training, going and like getting on the juice, right? But when a guy does it for
bodybuilding, or even a show, like a movie or something.
Or a movie or something like that, when an actor preps to play a character in a movie, and I'm just like, it makes sense for their job. That's what they do. There's inherent risk to every job, and maybe for their job they feel they're like this character type actor, and there's a physical form that they have to portray on screen to play this person, and for them the risk of going on a few cycles to get big enough to portray this person on screen is reasonable to them. Well, so I'm like,
you watched the Jack Reacher guy?
Yeah.
Monster. Like he's huge. And he was already a specimen before. And like, I mean, I don't know
his name now.
I forget his name.
I forget too. I knew it because I follow him on Instagram.
But monster. And they say he just ate a bunch of protein.
Which is obviously not. But I get too why when you're in the media
in
like
the line,
that.
Oh yeah, The Rock never talks about it.
Yeah, like they have a certain type of image, and you know what? And I don't think everything in life is as black and white as people think it is. The amount, like, so I look at The Rock, and people will be like, oh yeah, but whatever, he's all, he's obviously juicing, man, he's taking stuff. And I'm like, yeah, for sure he is. If you have any knowledge of exercise and
someone's capacity of holding muscle mass at the age of 57
in his 50s, you know what I mean?
And just he's like bigger than he was in his 40s.
Clearly he's on something. But when I look at the amount of good that person does in this world, that, and how much of it is connected to his image of being The Rock. He's this larger than life figure, right? John Cena, the guy's performed more Make-A-Wish miracles than any other human being in the history of planet Earth.
That's amazing.
Right? And part of seeing John Cena and The Rock is probably like, wow, like they have this physical presence to them, right? So, do I care that those guys do stuff? I don't care. I think they probably do more good with it
than bad.
Than bad. You know what I mean? It's not like they're out there trying to win something like an Olympic medal where we think there's this high amount of integrity in there and they've cheated the system or whatever.
And they're not.
The guy's making movies and he's was a WWE wrestler purely for our entertainment.
Totally.
Like, if that was part of their thing that they helped do it, then I don't know.
Literally playing superheroes, right?
Yeah,
and
totally.
I would even, I love how you say this, it's great. Like, there's a color scheme of morality in the world. That's what people don't understand. It's not even shades of gray, it's colors. It's like everything can bleed into something else. And and depending on the person who's interpreting that, it could be bad or negative. And then I even wonder, when you're just mentioning, I'm like, okay, what if The Rock came out and said he was on steroids? What does that do to kids that he's inspiring? Because some kids might take that negatively and be uninspired. Some kids might be like, I have to do steroids.
That's right,
Whereas I would almost rather he didn't mention it. And that kid turns 16, 18, 19, 20 and be like, oh, he's actually on steroids. Matures with inspiration like I did. And it's just like, hey, you know what? It's okay that we don't talk about it all the time. But then this is where the shades of gray and color come in. Because then someone as a teenager might think, that's something I can achieve, and then develops body dysmorphia because they can't have it. And then he gets into steroids. So again, like what you have mentioned is so important, because we just made two prime examples of why it's both good and bad.
Yes.
So we don't have an absolute answer there.
No.
And I think that's okay, but
there'll never be one.
No, there isn't.
We grew up the same way. Like, dude, I grew up like male role models in my life was like my dad and like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was probably like number 2 on the list. You know what I mean? And I mean, there's just everything about him, just the presence, the physical presence that he had. Obviously, he has a lot of charisma and he's funny and he's whatever, this and that. But his physical presence just set the stage for it all, right? And when I look at what he's done and accomplished in his life, right?
Totally.
Just like, dude, good for you. I don't know. You know
I still love Bill Burr's nothing but his whole thing about his scandal with the woman he had an affair with.
Yeah.
And he's just like, you got to see it because I'm going to butcher it. But basically, he's like, man, people are giving a hard time. This guy did nothing but net. Yeah. He was hitting aces. He came from a different country.
Right.
He turned into a movie star.
Yeah.
He even comes from a different country and runs for governor. Nothing but net. This guy's killing it. He wants to have one little fling on the side.
Yeah.
He missed it. It should have been a layup. He got caught. Can you blame the guy? But no, just to come back to the Ozempic thing. So, you do feel like, and I would agree, that it's essentially in the right tool, right case, it really does make sense for people. And if anything, it's even more promising than bariatric surgery because it seems way more effective because people can overeat bariatric surgery. They can still have a problem. And this... essentially could have, like, there are people who have side effects. There's a chance of, nausea, constipation, diarrhea, all those. It's a smaller portion, but people have them. Even a chance of thyroid cancer as well, apparently, possibly.
Okay.
But yes, and that's, if someone's prone to having it in their family life, then that's where you want to be aware of it.
Okay, yeah.
And again, that's why I even said this before, that no matter what, we should still be cautious with it when you're thinking about something. Like, it's still, it has been a product been used for quite a few years, but again, what else, like something like thyroid cancer develops over many years, right? So I see it as a promising thing. And there's even new forms coming out, like 4th generation drugs, I think is 4th generation, where it's not going to be an injection. It's going to be pill form. Oh, yeah. And might even have less side effects.
Right.
And with AI, do you ever listen to Dr. Mike Israetel?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's very pro pharma, pro AI and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And he does talk about something very promising here. It's like, once AI takes over some of this stuff and they're figuring out the equations and we get to test these things, it's pretty incredible what we're going to be able to do for the body.
Right.
He says in a theoretical basis, 10, 20 years, which we're at an exponential rate with everything with technology.
Right.
We could be solving things with a metabolic equation. We could be solving, like, people's appetite issues. There's the potential thing of, messing around with myostatin to maintain muscle without even doing strength training. Right. And this doesn't mean it's all healthy, but it's just that there's a potential for all these things. I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, that I think people should be both skeptical and optimistic. Yeah. I think it's a problem when people outright say pharmacy can't be a problem, it can't be a solution, Right? It goes back into when you get into the naturopaths and holistic thing, is like, you turn into a Luddite, you turn into the absolutism of, if it's not natural, it's not good. And one of my favorite things for naturalism is just, do you wear shoes?
Right. Yeah.
Do you drive in a car? Yeah. Right. Are we allowed to use the wheel? Right. Because that's a technological advancement. We're not living in caves anymore. Right. At what point are you saying that technology isn't okay?
Like, where do you draw the line? Yeah.
I mean, one of the funniest things to me is how much social media some of these carnivore people are doing. I'm like, you're right by a phone. There's actually more data that your phone hurts you more than aspartame does, but you're terrified of aspartame. And so I just think that, people get so, they get so afraid of these things, when we should start to accept the chance of it.
And no, totally agree, 100%. The one thing that I would encourage people to do, though, and this is where I think that sometimes we can fall a little short, when we're solely relying on these, let's say, pharmaceuticals, is that, and I mean, you'll know this as well as anyone just from your background and everything that you've done in this field, is that there is, when you go and you work out in the gym and you try to prioritize your sleep and you make an effort to eat healthy and you do all these things, there's a lot more that happens than just the physical benefits.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So like, if someone is solely on the pharmaceutical and they lose some weight and they're feeling a little better physically because their weight has been reduced, you're still missing out on so many other benefits of like going to the gym every day.
Yeah.
That like go, like, let's say with your mental health and stuff, like that consistently, like putting yourself through something difficult on a regular basis to build your resiliency, to build your self-confidence and your belief in yourself. There's a whole bunch of other mental and emotional positives that come from the whole process of it, right? That I think get missed sometimes if we only rely on like one piece of it, right?
I totally agree. And that's actually that is probably the biggest drawback that I think is going to come out more recently, other than people for sure that have side effects. But the biggest downfall is the people who are going to use it in replacement of still doing diet and exercise appropriately.
Yes, right.
So
I would still encourage that.
Totally.
Right?
Like if you
still go to the gym,
and if you don't have a good diet, and then you just take Ozempic, and you just have less shitty food, you're gonna head towards malnutrition. Like, you'll lose weight, and I would argue, depending on the person, context dependent, not absolutes. Someone who's obese, like very obese, and they're like 400 pounds, they go down to 200 pounds, and they're not even weight training. They are healthier, most likely. However, in that trajectory, if they're not having enough micronutrients, not having enough protein, so they're not maintaining muscle mass, they're not improving function, all these other things, sleep, all these other things, you're just meaning you are healthy. You're healthier.
Yes.
You're less prone to having maybe cancer, maybe like diabetes, less prone to having
any things that related
kidney
to
issues,
being overweight, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't mean, like, actually someone possibly still could be a diabetic candidate if you're having predominantly carbohydrates. There's plenty of actually underweight diabetics that exist.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And then you're not physically healthy if you're not doing enough strength training. And so I think that's where, hopefully, and this is probably going to be like the learning curve for society is with these drugs, is if these drugs come in to help people, it's like there's going to be people still ignoring the training and all that. And I made a post this the other day. Training is not to actually help you lose weight, it's to make you a healthier person in the weight loss process.
Right.
Like, some people are so sedentary, just a little bit of exercise does create a calorie deficit, and that, just that little bit can help like 5 or 6 pounds, right? Very quickly you're going to equate that, right? Sorry, go ahead.
No, go. Oh, and I was going to just add on, I was going to say, and mentally too, right?
Mentally huge.
It's not a secret out there. Like, you could pour over all the research. There is nothing more effective for our mental health than being physically active.
Training.
There's nothing. There's no current drug that exists on the market that is more effective for us than just regularly being physically active.
Right.
So
it's always known as, if it could be prescribed in a pill, it would be the most prescribed pill in the world by far. But the thing is I don't think we can pill that, right? Like, I don't think not in our lifetime that we'll be able to pill that. And you have mentioned something you don't want to, right? Because the thing that people have to overcome is the mental resiliency piece, the thing that you don't want to do, the dread and all that stuff. And that's actually a good thing. It's funny because I started going back to playing goaltending in the last few years. And for every single year, I'm like, I don't know if I'll play next year. I don't know if I'll play next year. I'm literally going to the game. I don't know if I'll play next year. Every year I do this. And I finally even started setting into like this feeling of not wanting to do it. Because I'm a goalie. It's like there's pressure on you. You have good games. You have bad games. Certainly it's great that you get to see your friends. And it's not like it's a terrible experience. Terrible experience when the game goes bad. It's the worst fucking experience. And there's always a chance of that. So that's the dread. That's why you don't want to show up. And it's also time out of your day, right? But I started to sit into, this is the thing I don't want to do, so I got to do it. And it's good that you feel this. It's good to feel this. Like, I still even do cold showers, not because it's, superior for weight loss or anything like that. it's because there's a little dread going in there.
Right.
And it just like, I actually like it after a workout, ironically.
Right.
Which you may or may not agree with this. So this is an interesting idea because
Right.
post-exercise,
Yeah.
right, cold immersion in a cold bath negatively affects hypertrophy, right?
Correct. Yeah, because it reduces inflammation.
Within 4 hours.
Inflammation is the catalyst for
the building
adaptations to go. Yeah.
Now, a cold shower is not the same as cold immersion. I'm not saying it isn't negative, but you're saying, let's say it's a 60-second shower, cold water, post-exercise. There's no data that suggests a cold shower is inherently negative.
Right.
How detrimental do you think that is? It's just conjecture. Like, it's just theorizing.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I mean, I feel like, I'm really not sure. So I imagine that it's not as much.
I imagine it's significantly less, but it is something.
It would be significantly less. I would even argue that, like, so don't get me wrong, like, I'm a big, when we talk cold tubs or whatever, I'm talking cold tubs with athletes and stuff. I'm just like, like if you're playing back-to-back games or you're in
recovery,
season,
when you
use it, because recovery now has become the priority of right. When you're training in the off season and you have specific goals of increasing strength or muscle size or anything like that, like, let's not use that as a recovery method, right? But if someone asked me, like, hey, give me the data on exactly how much it reduces the hypertrophy. Like, is it a noticeable amount or is it negligible? I actually wouldn't be able to give you any specific numbers. To be like, oh yeah, this has reduced the hypertrophy by 6% of this muscle that you have and blah blah blah.
I wouldn't expect you. I wouldn't say that you. That's an unfair question. I guess I think I was just using this as an opportunity to state my case, because I use it now post-exercise, even weight training, literally just so I go back to work feeling not warm. Right. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm actually totally against the people who obsess over it and say you have to cold plunge. It's the most important thing. It's super inconvenient. It's expensive for mostly cognitive benefits, unless you're an athlete that is provided for you and you have back-to-back games, you need recovery, which you just mentioned. So people have context is like, if you have a game the next day, we're not going to worry about any strength adaptations, hypertrophy adaptations. We want to reduce swelling, and we want you feeling fresh as if you didn't have that experience. Super valuable when you're in season, in training, that it's like back-to-back a lot of intensity, reduce swelling. That's all we care about. If you want to, and this is actually a good question. Do you think it affects strength as well? I know hypertrophy, but let's say they're in a training camp or they're doing some sort of training, and it does cause that, but you kind of want that adaptation. You're maybe, there's not an actual, like, I'm using box as an example. If you're close to the event, I would encourage them to use it. At what point in training camp do we want to say we want to deal with that soreness? It's okay if you're sore, you're dealing with it. And would we lose strength adaptations? Because the inflammation is a hypertrophy stimulus. And I hear people say it reduces strength and hypertrophy. I'm like, what does it do to strength? Because I thought strength was more neurological.
Yeah, a big part of it is. Totally is, I mean, it's a
theoretical. I've seen them study it more on hypertrophy, not strength. But they use it interchangeably. So that's kind of the interesting thing, that you see people use the language, and I don't think that's fair to say all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and too, like, we don't even know what the amount is. To be fair, is it amount that the average person would even notice? Would they even know?
No.
I don't know. Maybe.
Well,
maybe not.
Well, but for sure in the cold showers, what I was going to mention, and this is just like my anecdote, is like, I'm growing just fine. I'm doing my cold showers after, and going back to work after a cold shower, I feel like I haven't exercised. So it's like, it's nice. It's just like a nice refresh. I do want to go into athletics with you, because I haven't talked sports strength conditioning with you in a while. And I have some sincere questions, because I work with a lot of boxers. And I want to start with this overarching kind of theme that you helped me with. And I think we can clear some ideas around this. because boxers are very prone to overtraining and prone to traditional approaches that don't actually help, or there could be better ways, right?
Yeah.
Let's start off with a typical one. Running every day. Why would running every day be a bad idea? Or could there be better ideas or better ways to do it? Recently had an athlete who was like, oh, my opponent, he said he ran like 5 miles a day. I want to run every day. I'm like, okay. Just because he got this end result on you doesn't mean, like, it could be the exception, not the rule.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people who do it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't inherently always mean it's the best choice.
Right.
So a boxer says, I want to run it every day. How do you approach that question?
Yeah, so I think I have the conversation with him on, like, what's his goal on it? What's he trying to get out of it?
Right.
Is that in alignment with the goals that we've been talking about, right? Like, as someone there to help him, kind of give him or her the information on, like, hey, where would the benefit of this maybe come from? I would argue maybe there's a big aerobic component to boxing, obviously, right? So increasing our aerobic capacity in boxing could be helpful, right? Because you're going to definitely be entering an aerobic point of each fight where that becomes like a main energy system for us. And also in between rounds, your aerobic base is going to determine how well you can recover. And that's a very calculated thing in boxing, I would imagine.
Yes.
Obviously, I've never boxed. You'll know this better than me. But I would say, so is there value in increasing our aerobic base? I would say, yes, 100% there is. Now, we also know that increasing our aerobic base in one domain does not perfectly translate over to other domains, right? So like when Lance Armstrong ran the New York Marathon, people were predicting, because he had the highest VO2 at that time ever measured on a bicycle, people were saying, like, this guy could win the marathon. Like, he's got the highest VO2 max ever recorded on a bicycle. Like, his aerobic capacity is so high, it'd be whatever. Obviously, biking and running are just different enough activities that it doesn't carry over completely. There's still a skill required in that. So does running carry over to boxing completely? I would say probably not, because they're different, right? There's probably quite a bit of carryover, like as far as the nature of the movements or whatever. Just obviously, you're
rhythmic on your feet,
right?
You're
you know what I mean?
There's,
and you probably have a certain cadence in boxing, I would imagine, right? That you're kind of trying to stay to, right? Whether you're trying to press a fight, or whether you're more defensive, or whatever. I'm sure there's a cadence to how you move your feet and how you throw your punches or stuff like that. So there's probably some similarities to be drawn between the two. I'm always a big, like, specific guy. Like, I would imagine that the best conditioning for a boxer is boxing. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how anyone would argue that. I feel like it's probably the best. But so I would just be like, hey, you want to increase your aerobic base? That's cool. If you don't want to be boxing all the time, which I understand, let's find a mixture of different activities that we can do, whether we're running, or maybe we're on the Airdyne, or maybe this or that. And let's just establish where we want to get your aerobic base to, but understand that that's not the only part of the sport that's going to make you successful. And just like every athlete, when we have an off season, you're going to be in different phases of your training, depending where you're at. There might be a time where we feel that expanding your aerobic base is absolutely the most important thing for you to do. But there's also going to be times where we feel like increasing the amount of force you can produce is maybe the most important thing, or increasing the amount of force you can produce, or increasing the speed at which you can produce that force is the most important thing that you can do. Or so, there's going to be different, depending where you are in your training program, different priorities that take that top spot, right?
Yeah, and that's fair, because that's what a lot of boxers don't think about. They don't think about the development going over towards fights. And I love that you mentioned that, specific demands, right? To specific adaptation to impose demands. So the SAID principle. Now, that's where I've always come to boxing, and I say, you don't run around the ring. Why would you need to run every day? I mean, but at the same time, I'm not against people doing extra work, because hockey players skate every morning before they actually go to their their event. Like basketball players will dribble a ball in the morning.
Right.
What you have mentioned is important too. Is like I think it is important to take people outside the sport to do some sort of an aerobic or anaerobic, some explosive work outside the sport, so that you don't, not even just mentally, but physically beat up the same joints the same way routinely, where you can have crossover. Like Aerodyne is a prime example of excellent crossover to the sport with the upper and lower body combining
working together,
and just really good anaerobic explosive work that you can do off that.
Like my feeling would be that you could take someone who runs marathons and you could put them in a boxing ring and tell them to throw punches for 30 seconds and they would be devastatingly exhausted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Even though they're like, oh man, I run the 3 half marathons a year and I run them in under an hour and 50 minutes and I blah, blah, blah. And you get them to throw punches because it's a different enough activity. That their aerobic base, were very good in running, isn't necessarily going to fully transfer over to boxing.
When you think about, like, let's kind of look at broad pictures as much as you understand about boxing, it requires both aerobic and anaerobic and explosive. It's repeated sprints and aerobic, right? So you're spurt, jog, right? Now, if you think of an athlete like that, and amateur boxing, we're talking about 3 rounds, amateur Olympic style boxing, 2 to 3 minute rounds with 1 minute rest. So the thing I try to get a lot of my athletes to do is to experience more high intensity work, repeat sprints, rather than worry too much about the ongoing, but we still hit that. And what I kind of look at it as, and I would love to know your feedback on how you would approach it. I look at it as we have almost all energy systems working in it because it's a repeated sprint that's random, which might not be a perfectly repeated sprint. So it's like, as much as I want to say it's sprint, jog, it's actually sprint, jog, sprint, jog, sprint. Like it's all over the fucking place. So the way that I look at, like, almost time intervals that I work with my athletes, I want them to work repeated sprints within 5 to 10 seconds, but giving them very big adequate rest, like EMOMs, right? So that you're getting that explosive and you're used to continuing to recruit explosive, so that you maintain that explosiveness in your movements. Then I look at, like, the 10 to 20 or 15 to 25 second interval, because that's like when the fight just keeps going and you don't want it to, but you have to maintain the explosiveness. Again, giving at least a 2 to 3 to 1 work to rest ratio. Then I look at the 30 to 45 second interval, and that would be the glycolytic, when things start to accumulate, when things start to burn. And then occasionally, depending on where they're at in their training, I will hammer what I call aerobic power, which I don't think it is, but it's exhausting all of the other energy systems and still demanding the highest output from your aerobic. So I always get people to do a treadmill drop set, where it's like, run as fast as you can on the treadmill, you drop it when you have to. And it's murderous, because you're just like, you run out of your power, you run out of everything, and then you're just fucking surviving, because that's what it feels like in the ring. Now, I look at those energy groups like almost like muscle groups. Like, you got to hit your movements. Like, you got to hit your squat, your push, pull, dead. Like, I want to hit them within I'm starting to look at this more as like a week, but I used to do it within a workout. I was curious if there's another way that you would look at it, any other way, or maybe we just want to work on one specific kind of energy system for a while or another. Like, how would you approach the problem of trying to get someone explosive for, like, the anaerobic explosive sport that boxing is with repeated sprints? How would you approach that problem?
So I mean, it's it's an interesting question. I think it is important. I'm happy you kind of clarified. Amateur boxing, 3 rounds.
3 rounds
look much different than a 12-round fight or whatever. As soon as when we were initially talking, I was like thinking, like, that's why I was like, oh, there's going to be a phase of this fight which probably becomes really aerobic as they go deeper into the rounds.
Totally.
But,
it's a whole different
volume. At like 3 rounds and 2 to 3 minutes, obviously that also changes our thing, right? Like, because you're right on that, like, you could get about 2 minutes of super high intensity work, right? When we're right on that kind of threshold then of switching over right into aerobic.
Completely aerobic,
yeah. And so, and if you got a 2 minute round, or a 3 minute round or 2 minute rounds, what determines the difference between 2 or 3 minute
Novices is under 10 minutes. Gotcha. And then open is anything above 10 experience fights. So if you're under 10, you're a novice, and a lot of people start there. And then
2 minute rounds.
And then 3 threes is for the open fighters.
Yeah. So, I mean, arguably, like, you could probably spend like a ton of time then, like just taking it right to that work, like right to that 2-minute marker, right? Knowing that that's the total length of your round, right? And obviously in your fight, you're probably not going all out for 2 minutes, but I like your idea of having intervals in there that maybe aren't set intervals, because we work so hard usually in the gym. It's like, okay, we're going 5 on, 15 off, or we're going 10 on, 20 off, or we're going whatever, 30 on, 30 off, or 20, 40, or whatever. Yeah. And we kind of have all these set things that are just kind of standardized, just depending on the things that we're working on. But I do like your idea of like mixing up the intervals where it's like,
within a round.
Yeah.
Right. I actually just said that that's how the sport is, but I didn't actually program that. So it'd almost be like version of interval training within a short window.
Yeah, like I feel like I would probably, if I was working with a boxer, that would definitely be in my toolbox. Like maybe not off the very start.
No, it would be in that base.
But as you start getting closer to the idea of a round, you know what I mean? And I would take a look and be like, yeah, okay, like we're going for 2 minutes hard here. I'm going to give you a speed whatever call out, you know what I mean? Or, almost like how we would do the speed power protocol, but like different. One would be speed, and instead of power, it would be something else or whatever. Yeah. Power, speed, speed cruise or something like that.
Yeah, it'd be speed aerobic. You'd almost like you'd be the sprint jog, but you could just have it randomized for the individual a little bit. The challenge here is like I work remotely with a lot of clients, but you could still have them just challenge themselves on different, like the curved treadmills are great for this, right? Curved treadmills where you're like, hey, these are your intervals that you have to crank it up. This is where you jog as slow as you want, but you got to jog. Jump rope's another one that you could do it for. I'm curious, how would you help an individual work on repeated sprint endurance? Other than just like literally repeating sprints. I always stick to a lot of EMOM style stuff. But then I also kind of sometimes closer to fights, I'll get guys to replicate a round of 5 to 10 on, 10 to 15 off, repeating that for 2 or 3 minute round. And it could be, if it's close to the fight, it's going to be a minute rest. Farther from the fight, I'll give them 2 minute rest. So we get closer to the fight, more like the circumstance of the fight.
That makes sense.
Any other approaches that you try to help people with power endurance?
Yeah, I was just going to say it would just be looking at the variables that we have within our control, right? And then deciding, so you're going to have the length of time that you're working for. You're going to have the rest times, like all within the intervals themselves. And then you're going to have the rest time like between rounds or between sets or reps or however you want to categorize it, right? So obviously just in general, the basic principle most of the time is to be able to increase our work time and decrease our rest times and still put out a high level of output, right? So, I mean, there would be different ways to measure that. I won't say that we have some fancy way of measuring it in the gym. It's mostly just the naked eye test. Like I'm watching an athlete and being like, oh yeah, like they started doing this for 15 seconds on and 45 seconds off for X amount of rounds, and then they'd get a 2 minute rest or whatever. And now they're doing it for 20 seconds on and 40 seconds off. So they're going harder for 5 seconds and getting 5 seconds less rest. But in how I view them, I see them being just as explosive as they were when we were doing, you know what I mean? Does that really give you any good data? No, it's just an opinion, right? You get to know your athlete you're watching. That's how I would say we do the majority of our stuff. There's other ways to measure like work being done, I guess, in the gym, depending what you're doing the conditioning on. I mean, the good thing is with Aerodyne bikes is they measure wattage. So you get an athlete to measure or track their wattage on it and maintaining. That'd be a great example, right? And what you want to be careful there, as you mentioned, is like, are you maintaining the wattage? We're not just trying to tell you out if you're going to do power endurance. We don't want to just grind it. It's like, what can you maintain it for?
I've heard someone talk about this, like if you just make it hard, that doesn't mean it's progressing right. So you want to, it's almost like hitting the right rep range.
Yeah.
But it's easier to hit a good rep range with reps because you know if you can do another rep, people will grind out bad forms or like slower reps. And we don't want you to practice slow reps if this is your goal to be powerful.
Right.
So you could almost give someone like a time interval range. How long can you hold this peak wattage for?
Yeah.
It starts to dissipate. Track that, stop there.
Exactly.
Now, do you notice that it's better next week? Do you notice the week after? Is it the 7th rep, 8th rep, or whatever? Now we're getting better power endurance.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Like having a measuring thing can be really helpful. Something tangible, right, to hang your hat on. Like I was going to say, if I'm being honest, do we use a lot of those measurements? No, like I said, a lot of it's just through the
feel and
the naked eye of just watching the athlete, watching their body language, and just remembering from week to week when I had them do something, being like, oh yeah, no, like we're going an extra 10 seconds this week, and like they look like just as explosive, if not more, and I'm watching them set over set, and I don't feel like they're losing any power, right?
That's good.
But I mean, a lot of that's because that's when we're just out on the turf doing stuff, right? Doing intervals and stuff like that. And, maybe they're doing like jumping lunges, you know what I mean? Or skater stride jumps with the hockey guys. And we're really just kind of guesstimating, right? On what we're seeing and how the athlete's feeling. And, do they look more ready to go when the next interval starts? Are they like keeled over, laying on the floor in between? Or are they like walking around being like, oh, I feel good. I feel, you know what I mean? Like you're looking at a bunch of those. Are they like purely scientific? No, you know what I mean? But that's how we actually end up evaluating a lot of our stuff, right? But yeah, sometimes like when we use the Airdynes or the Echo bikes that we have, there's wattage on there. So we'll look at that. Right? Like just, are you able to maintain this? Or sometimes on those bikes too, we'll do something like with the RPMs, right? Like, are you able to maintain 80 RPMs for the full 2 minutes or whatever the intervals are that you're going with, right? So there are things that we use like that as well, right? Like I said, because to maintain that RPMs, that speed, like a certain amount of power has to be being produced. And as you fatigue, you're able to still hit that minimum, right?
Right.
And I mean, you'd get that on any of the machines that you use, whether we're using the, fan bikes or the rower or the ski ergs or stuff like that, right? But anything that we do off the turf, it's just kind of being...
It has to be visual.
It's visual 100%. And just through communication, right?
Totally.
If the athlete tells me that they're feeling better than they were last week, all right, then you feel better. You know what I mean? Like, as unscientific as that sounds, but that's really the way some of it goes, right?
I was curious of your view on, so I had this guy, Don Moxley, on, and he was a strength conditioning coach for, I can't remember, I want to say it was Michigan wrestlers, all-state wrestlers, amazing. Like he has this crazy, they were all-American wrestlers. He had a bunch of people, and what he had mentioned was, now this is wrestling specific, but I thought it was so interesting. When you got a wrestler's deadlift above 2.5, or maybe it was 2.3 their body weight, no other extra performance benefits. And every sport's going to have a different number of that, but I thought it was really interesting. And then he said what made a difference was muscular endurance.
Right.
And I was like, wow, it's like I just forgot about muscular endurance and I train it with an athlete.
Right.
Because I feel like you can get that so much from your sport to some degree. So like I stay too focused on the strength speed continuum. That's what we always did with hockey guys.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we do a ton of it.
And then I'm also so cautious with boxers because they take so much damage, right? They have a high demand sport. But now I'm thinking about adding more strength endurance to this kind of an athlete. How would you approach that? That possible style of training with someone like an athlete. I feel like the main way I feel at helping is possibly within legs to better endurance. Yeah. And honestly, shoulders for just keeping hands up.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So how would you input that into a program?
So I feel like one would just be, obviously you could play around with rep ranges. You could play around with rest times, like recovery times, right? So if they're doing strength exercises, there's obviously ranges that we could work in that are considered more strength endurance than power and absolute strength, right?
Right.
We could get into that higher rep work.
Even slowing down the reps.
And there would be a Well, yeah, so that would be interesting. So I guess my thought would be that if we, let me think about this here out loud. So yes, like, do you mean just from the standpoint of then you'd be increasing the total like time under tension, like to work on the muscular endurance that way?
And you're slowing the concentric.
Right.
So if you slow the concentric, I'm not necessarily encouraging for this guy to take more eccentric damage.
Right.
But forcing them to, and they would have to lower their weight.
Right.
But because we're going for muscular endurance, the muscular endurance isn't going to come from the fast twitch as much. You actually want to stimulate the type 1 muscles.
Right.
And so even slowing down some of these, you'll probably do something like a leg press. I wouldn't want to do something with the barbell on their back, goblet squat or something like that. But to slow it down up and down, where like instead of that taking them 20 seconds, it takes them a minute, that they're doing this long endurance.
Right.
Because then they're creating this tension on the muscle, and it literally just actually you're programming more of the aerobic style muscles, but under a strength concept.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
I had another strength coach do that with me, so I was just curious your view on that.
Like I would, my first instinct would be to just like, not that I would want to like do anything crazy with the tempo in either direction, but my first instinct would be to just try to increase like the total amount of reps or work or reps that can be done in a certain amount of time. You know, like you remember when we used to do like the 2-minute leg press or whatever, and we kept the weight the same. It was standard. It was 3 plates a side and like max reps that you could do in 2 minutes. And then you'd have a number that you'd be trying to beat. You know what I mean? Something like that, where like, you're trying to prolong or put off the
recovery,
the involuntary slowing of the muscle contractions, right? You know what I mean? Like the fatigue, right? Like you're trying to put that off the best you can to get as many reps as you can.
Deal with the stress of glycogen.
I feel like that would be what my first thought would just naturally go to, right? Like, okay, we got to increase muscular endurance in this guy. We know we have, let's create some sort of parameters to give us like a bit of a measurement. So we know he's fighting in a 2-minute round. So let's see how many quality reps we could get in 2 minutes. Now we've got a baseline. How can we increase this, right?
Yeah, and I think this is just like, I would just started thinking about approaching this different because I want to stay away from demanding too much from the heavy motor neurons, because you want the fast switch to be exhausted in some other exercises. So you could argue like a wall sit that's weighted, because you're not dealing with less muscle soreness. The slowing of the contraction might actually be beneficial for the endurance. Right. I was thinking of isometrics more, because they would have especially like a front rack carry is something I wanted to start putting all my boxers through, because I'm like, you guys all have a fucking hard time to keep your hands up.
Keep your hands up.
Do that for 2 minutes.
Right.
And benefiting your shoulders, because now we're actually working on shoulder stability. Yeah. So I was just curious that you're viewing that, because I just don't think about prescribing it enough. Right. Because I think about squat, hinge, push, pull. Yeah. What's our explosive movement? Right. What's our shoulder recovery for external rotators, and rotational movement for power for core? Right. And plyometric system. That's my standard, case. And if the athlete does that once a week, I know they're going to do much better, way more resilient to injury. But if you want to really develop someone, then you can do a second strength day, maybe a third, and that's where you start hitting individual features rather than just maintenance. It's more of a maintenance program. Right.
And it would be interesting too to see, like, again, obviously boxing is not my specialty, but depending on just like we would set ourselves up, obviously, with everything we do in the gym to put ourselves in a better position to be successful on the court, on the field, on the ice, and in the ring, right? Like, is an athlete really well suited to work on their shoulder muscular endurance by being in the ring and throwing a million punches or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
You got to wonder what demands belong in the sport, what demands can be done in the strength training. I mean,
you know what I mean?
that's the old punching dumbbells.
Right. Yeah.
And we have it in our gym, but luckily they all do 2 pounds.
Right.
And I say, hey, I'm okay with the 2 pounds.
Yeah.
It gives you representative, very close to the weight of a glove, so I get that. It makes people actually contract.
You know,
when people are doing 10 pounds, 15 pounds, it's like you're probably not imposing the demands that
no, and you're probably also significantly changing your technique of how you're throwing a punch. And like, why would you want to do that? You know what I mean? And like, so it's it's interesting, though.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's why I just want to pick your brain on some different ideas. And I mean, I'm continuing to learn in being that strength and conditioning coach, and to be able to help guys with that, because I think there's more people. There's even a great account called Boxing Science I watch sometimes, and they're trying to get people away from the standard traditional and running all the time. And we still even have it on one of these training things we did for our last melee, and it was like on the workout it said push-ups and sit-ups. I'm like, guys, take that fucking off there.
Right.
They don't need to do more push-ups.
Right.
Tell them to do a bunch of. I would rather you break bodyweight squats for some of these guys because they're so new to exercise.
Right.
Their push-ups didn't fucking help them.
Right.
It probably causes more shoulder issues, right? And I literally the year before, because they sent it to me, I forgot to review it and tell them to put it on there. But I'm like, give them this. Like, give them a free workout. This is what they need. They don't need more push-ups and sit-ups. And even like my coach Ryan, he says, yeah, you guys can do your push-ups and sit-ups after. I was like, no, we just don't need to.
Right.
Like, it's not what we're missing. We did a ton of pushing, right? I actually posted today. I was so thrilled with Mike Tyson video recently.
Yes.
Since he's working out.
I saw a video today about all that posterior work he was doing.
He's doing the first thing they show is back flies. Yes, rows. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
He's doing the proper neck movements. He's doing actually loading it, and he's even said on the podcast where like that old wrestling style of doing those neck bridges are terrible for his neck.
Right.
Not to mention, I hate it when I see this part where just people don't even understand the force production. I see people put on that head thing, and then this guy would be doing this. I'm like, are you encouraging them to pop your head back? Like it's not what you actually want it for posture.
Right.
This is more of like just making sure that your neck doesn't end up stiff forward.
Right.
But you actually want to resist the forward movement if you're going to help your sport.
Right.
So I don't know. It just gets very caught up in the traditional approach. So I was curious on that.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. Like, obviously I've never trained a boxer for a fight anyway, or have never trained one before, but it'd definitely be sometimes it's kind of interesting and exciting to get outside your regular box and like work with another sport, right? We work with so much hockey, football, volleyball, that type of stuff.
And it's such a linear progression.
Yeah.
You get a linear progression in those athletes to prepare them for the sport, and then but like with boxers, that linear progression is so short if you get one.
Right.
And it's going to be maintenance, and they want some progression in there, right? So like camps are random, and if you're locally here, you got to be in fight shape. And then you got to maintain fight shape and continue to grow fight shape during season, essentially.
Right. Yeah. You don't have a designated here's day one of training camp, and here's when the season ends, and here's.
They don't even know if they're going to get their fight if they get ready for a fight in 8 weeks out. And it's you're going to get 8 weeks out, and then any week could be your week.
Right.
And so it becomes really challenging, and you boxers are so willing to overtrain.
Right.
Because they're willing to fight. Right. Hockey players, they touching goal who wants to really work hard in the gym, right?
Totally.
And like I don't know as much of the other sports, but I just know with boxers, they invite. Like I was that guy. Yeah. I invited the overtraining. It was like it was a good sign. It was the Rocky Balboa feeling. Right. Yeah. So it ends up being challenging to know. I want to finish with this and talk about this new setup, and I want to talk about your business really quick here. Yeah. Because I'm so curious about how it's going. You can tell people about it. So tell people about what your business is now and what you're doing.
Yeah, so it's called Invictus Performance Focused Psychotherapy, or Invictus PFP for short, or even just Invictus, if you see the sign out front. It is even though it says performance-based psychotherapy, it's not just for athletes, it's for anyone. Like I obviously feel that we all have areas or aspects of our life which we're trying to improve. right? So it doesn't matter if you're an athlete or a professional athlete, an amateur athlete, if you're a teacher, if you're a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, a mechanic, or whatever your chosen profession is. We all have the areas of our life we're trying to improve upon, right? We all have the areas of our life that we face challenges in, whether that's professionally in work, whether that's in relationships with our partner, with friends, with our parents, with our kids, with our, we all face those things. They're not exclusive to any one population alone, and no one's exempt from them, right? So the idea was to have a therapy spot to help people overcome those, right? And having a strong background in strength and conditioning, obviously I could also promote a huge activity component to it as well, because I really believe that's a big piece for people when they're feeling overwhelmed or when they don't have the confidence to work through their challenges. Just by getting physically active, it's amazing how their mindset changes and what they think they're capable of changes, right? And just their overall general outlook and mood changes, right? But yeah, so that's what I do. I work with a ton of athletes and sports teams. I do a ton of work with Sport Manitoba, and athletes that seek me out privately on the side. But I also work with a bunch of people from the general population. And obviously I absolutely love it. It's great, man. It seemed like a natural progression for me, right? Because you spend so much time with people in the gym, I feel like, all of a sudden you really get to know people and you build these good, meaningful relationships, and they really trust you and you have mutual respect for each other, and all of a sudden you're having these conversations, right? And about all sorts of stuff going on in their life, right? And any trainer that's spent a sufficient amount of time in the gym probably feels like at some point or another they were also someone's unofficial therapist, and which is great. Obviously, that doesn't happen if you don't have a good relationship with the client,
right?
And so, part of it was like this, part of it was this desire to organically be able to help people better and be more useful in those situations that I was already in. Part of it was for my own personal growth and benefit, because I always like to be learning and challenging myself and doing stuff, and part of it was just seeing a need out there with people to have more resources for them, and to be hopefully part of the solution, right? Make myself more useful, right? Now I can help people in different domains and that have a lot of crossover with one another, so that was kind of it, man. That was what started it, right? But obviously I love it. Chose the name Invictus, even though I know it's been used in a lot of different businesses and ways, but just because for myself it's one of my favorite poems out there. I don't know if you've ever read the poem Invictus.
I haven't read it, but you told me about it.
Yeah, and it's just, it's the general theme of it is just that life's going to be tough, but the only way out is through. Right. And so that's the basic thing of the poem is this guy describing that there's be tons of trials and tribulations, but at the end of the day, life isn't going to find him beaten down.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's going to just lean into the resistance and just work his way through it, right? So, which I feel is kind of the philosophy of my therapy practice, right?
Beautiful.
Is trying to help people identify what the challenge really is, right? Because sometimes we'll tell ourselves all sorts of different things, right? But just try to help them identify what the challenge really is, have them come to the realization, help them come to the realization that everything that they want is, right on the other side of the work that they're avoiding.
Right.
Right. And just support them as they go through it, right? But empower them, just like we were talking at the beginning, like I'm just here to help empower them, to help them realize that they're capable of doing that.
Right.
There's nothing special that I do for them.
Right.
You know what I mean? I got no magic secrets. I got no whatever. There's nothing. I can't do it for them. Mm-hmm. Everyone that I've worked with that has had success, it's because they've made it happen, and I'm extremely proud of them. I'm so happy to be a part of it. I feel grateful for the opportunity to meet these people and be able to give them tools and stuff to help them along the way, but they do it all themselves, man. They're amazing people, right?
Awesome.
They're great. And yeah, I'm just, like I said, I draw a lot of not happiness, fulfillment in my life out of being useful.
Yeah. Having purpose.
Yeah, having purpose and feeling like I'm contributing to society and contributing to the world, right? And we find our ways to do it, and my way seems to be helping people in the gym or outside the gym realize that they're fully capable of being whoever they want to be.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have any social media, any business that we're gonna talk about?
Yeah. So I have a website and I have an Instagram account. They should both be better than what they are, but my intentions are
Start
good.
somewhere.
Yeah, my intentions are good, but the website is invictuspfp.com.
Okay.
That's the Instagram handle too, invictuspfp.com. The base information is there though. The contact information is there on how to get a hold of me, my email, my phone number, and then just the way that I operate. I way rather have the opportunity to jump on a phone call with someone or jump on a Zoom call with someone or meet someone in person and talk to them about it and what the options are and what the potential is to work together and stuff, then I look forward to those conversations. So part of me doesn't mind that there's limited information on there, that just the basics, just the essentials on there. I also, from working in the fitness industry for so long and seeing what people have done in the online in the therapy industry and the mental health, I do understand that there's a reach that you can create there to really help people, like in a genuine way as well, right? So I really should look on expanding that. And I don't know how you do it, man, like how you do your stuff consistently all the time. I struggle with being consistent on social media.
Well, you talked about a lot of face-to-face work, right?
Yeah.
So with online, there's a lot more program structured work, right? Mm-hmm. So I still and I know what you mean. I love talking to my clients. I had a bunch of chats tonight, and on Wednesday, awesome. I got clients. It's great. But there's also weeks where I don't have that. So there is a lot of free time that you use, and it's mostly pushed towards marketing.
Right.
But I think the really great thing within your industry, as we talked about, is it's just there's a need, and so I feel like what you're doing is in the right way. Is just like focusing on referrals because they're going to come much more naturally, I think, in that realm.
Right.
Because training nutrition is important and it's a hard problem to solve, but you're going into more root problems, right? And as we've mentioned, like that's the root of training and nutrition problems is creating this control and this idea of what is within your locus of control. What can you actually dictate for yourself, and the powers within you, right? So we'll leave it with that. I'll provide your stuff in the show notes, and I'm certain we're going to have your my most repeated guest. So I'm going to have you on again. We'll see if it's a whiskey one or not, but we'll talk more about the performance stuff in the future. So thanks for being on today, man.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I'm always happy to be here.
Always a pleasure. Okay.
So that was a really fun conversation, as always, with AJ. We got to really shoot back and forth. And I think a lot of the things that he responds with, I have a sense that he's going to, especially when it came with some of these health concerns around the microplastics and just how many things can you concern yourself with at once. And we just try to pay attention to the information as it comes out. And you don't have to get overly anxious unless there is substantial proof. And it's not that that's always the right way, because you could be wrong about things. It took a while before we realized cigarette smoking was bad. Maybe we find out even more about things like cell phones. But there are people studying these things pretty actively and routinely. And if you just want to hedge your bets on something like microplastics,
get, a tin or a glass water bottle if you're really worried. Use less plastic. Don't microwave plastic. These are things that you can just try to over time. But as AJ mentioned, people just are trying to be good parents. People are just trying to exercise routinely. And we just know that a lot of people can't do the exercise and nutrition right. And I know people who are obsessed with plastics, they can't do the nutrition right. And so if we're still just having a hard time with that one, that is the big rock to carry, as it is to improve your relationship with food over time, is to make sure you're showing up and doing exercise routinely rather than worrying about all the little minor details, because we don't even know what's actually going to add up substantially, but we know nutrition can. So that would be some of my best advice when someone's concerned about it. Be aware of it, but until you've actually mastered the beast of nutrition, which is going to be a lifelong battle for some of us, it's not really worth the concern, because it's going to take from your resources, your mental and emotional resources to try to improve that. And then I think we had a lot of other really good topics that I think you probably enjoyed. I thought it was really fun to talk to him about, like, it's not, it's shades of gray. It's not always black and white. When we even talked about the celebrities and steroid use, how someone could look at that as a positive and someone could see it as a net negative. It depends on the individual. And I think there's a lot of things like that when it has to do with anything, especially with morality and training and nutrition, how even people who are kind of fear mongering around certain things on nutrition, maybe it works for someone, right? So that's where the shades of gray can come in, because oh, well, I did what they said. I ate nothing but whole food. I said this was poison, all that stuff. I got rid of seed oils and I'm better. You're right. It's better for you. And the thing that I look at, my messaging is around what's better for most and what's probably better for most. And I've never said that your anecdote is null and void. I never said your anecdote isn't important, and their anecdotes who are saying this isn't important. I'm saying that we got to be careful to generalize. And I'm saying that absolutes aren't guaranteed, or absolutes are absolutely wrong, because there's always shades of gray and there's always nuance and detail that deserves some context for people. But AJ pointed out something really powerfully there, and he had mentioned that fear is a great motivator. So if you call things poison, you call them toxic, you're very motivated to not do that thing. But then it can cause these people to feel like failures. Oh, I had candy. Oh, I have sea oils. Oh, I'm completely off. So it's the on and off switch again. So that's why it's just helpful for most, not all, that you allow yourself shades of gray. You allow yourself to evolve over time in whatever you're trying to conquer. And I just think there's a lot of value there. It was a really fun conversation around the boxing and the conditioning and how you go about it, and how I, even as I was talking to him about it, I would do it a bit different than what he was talking about, just in terms of the way he was referring to doing that leg press thing. I'm not saying it wouldn't work. I just would worry about the overall systemic fatigue from that individual. I think when we did it with hockey players, this is off season, and for sure they'd be crazy sore. And we're just throwing a lot of theory out there, right? And, there's some practices out there that you can look at, but, you can approach so many things in so many different ways. I always say there's 100 ways up the same hill, 1,000,000 ways up the same hill. You just got to decide which one has a less jagged edge for you. What has a nice walking path, what has a maybe just appropriately steep path for you. And some people go through jagged edges, and some people are able to go a nice, simple, steady way. And that's the goal, is to make something hard as least difficult as possible. And that's what you want to do with your training. So hopefully, if you're into training in boxing in that realm, you got some, value out of that. And maybe you're just curious about how boxers train and stuff like that. And it might be a little bit interesting to hear that perspective, that running every day doesn't help everyone, right? And I'm super excited with what AJ is doing with Invictus. He's inspired me to get into my own schooling, which I'll tell you more about in the future once the ball's kind of rolling on that. But I'm hoping to do a lot of what he's doing now in the future. And so I'm really pumped to see how he's able to help more people. We'll probably even transform a lot of the conversations on our podcast to talk more about psychology and what he's found through his practices. But with that being said, I was so curious about, the name Invictus, the poem he spoke about, and how he had mentioned how it's just about the path through and just about being strong. And so I looked it up. So we're going to leave it off today with this wonderful, wonderful poem. This was written by William Ernest Henley in 1875. And I think it really does captivate what he's talking about. So I'll leave you off with this wonderful poem, Invictus. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I think whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced or cried out loud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. What powerful words that truly is. And let's top off with the mantra that you know comes from this podcast. Life is not about the pursuit of happiness, but rather it's the happiness within your pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.